All right, so earlier this morning, we actually got a little bit of good news because the Joe Biden administration has managed to successfully negotiate a prisoner swap to get Brittney Griner, the well-known WNBA player, back home to the United States after she was obviously arrested over in Russia back in, I think, February for having a couple of vape cartridges on her. And the prisoner swap was Brittney Griner for this well-known Russian arms dealer who is brutal and not a good guy, to say the least. But overall, in the aggregate view of all of this, I think that this is definitely a massively positive thing that the Biden administration was able to do. So here from Biden himself, he tweeted this out: "Moments ago, I spoke to Brittney Griner. She is safe. She is on a plane. She is on her way home." And then you can see him pictured with the wife of Brittney Griner, who also has some things that she added to this entire conversation that I'll get to here in a second. And then I'm going to get into some of the pretty deranged conservative responses to this negotiated prisoner swap, because they basically think that it wasn't worth it to bring Brittney Griner home in exchange for this Russian arms dealer. But a little bit more information here from AJ Plus. They say, breaking: WNBA star Brittney Griner was freed in a prisoner swap with a Russian international arms dealer. Griner was sentenced to 9 years in prison for 2 vape cartridges. Okay, 9 years for 2 vape cartridges. Okay, this is what we're talking about here. Completely ridiculous charges. And I would definitely say that, even if she did technically violate the law within Russia, this is obviously something that Russia was using against the United States, the ongoing invasion of Ukraine, using this as a leverage point, knowing that Brittney Griner is such a, gigantic figure within the United States and such a well-known, famous person. So they were definitely trying to leverage this a little bit, and it seems like they got somewhat of a payout with the the guy who they managed to get released in exchange for Brittney Griner. But again, completely ridiculous charges here. 2 vape cartridges for 9 years in prison. And, if you look into some of the background details in terms of the conditions that she was under, it was pretty brutal. It was pretty terrible. But she also had, they say, a medical prescription for chronic pain. So, it wasn't even just recreational. It's something she was prescribed. But even if it was recreational, we got to end the war on drugs. This entire situation, whether it's in the United States or Russia or any country on the face of the planet, having people arrested for weed or marijuana or really any recreational drugs whatsoever is completely disgusting and absurd, and obviously, is not my position in any way, shape, or form. But now I want to show you guys just a little bit of Joe Biden himself speaking and making this actual announcement. And he brings up another name here, Paul Whiteman, I think it is, or Whiteman, who is basically another person who conservatives have been bringing up, who is still stuck in Russia and has not been released. They've been trying to get him back for years now, since he was arrested back in 2018. And he's going to mention him at the end of this clip and basically just allude to the fact that they are not giving up on the fight to get him back. And we're also going to get a statement from Brittney Griner's wife herself about Paul and the ongoing fight to try to get him back as well. But the reason I bring that up is because this is somebody who conservatives have been massively focused on and saying, wow, you got the WNBA star back, but you didn't get back this Marine who's been arrested for years now. How could you do this? This is a betrayal. Brittney Griner hates the United States of America because, she's advocated for like social justice in the past or something like that. And, you didn't get back this heroic Marine figure, and so you're a terrible person, blah, 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 blah. But let's just go ahead and get into this clip here, and then I'll give you guys that additional context.
Ago, standing together with her wife Sherelle, in the Oval Office, I spoke with Brittney Griner. She's safe. She's on a plane. She's on her way home. After months of being unjustly detained in Russia, held under intolerable circumstances, Brittney will soon be back in the arms of her loved ones, and she should have been there all along. This is a day we've worked toward for a long time. We never stopped pushing for her release. It took painstaking and intense negotiations, and I want to thank all the hard-working public servants across my administration who worked tirelessly to secure her release. I also want to thank the UAE for helping us facilitate Brittney's return, because that's where she landed. These past few months have been hell for Brittney and for Charlie and her entire family and all her teammates back home. People all across the country have learned about Brittney's story, advocated for her release, stood with her throughout this terrible ordeal. And I know that support meant a lot to her family. I'm glad to be able to say that Brittney's in good spirits. She's relieved to finally be heading home. And the fact remains that she's lost months of her life, experienced a needless trauma, and she deserves space, privacy, and time with her loved ones to recover and heal from her time being wrongfully detained. Brittney is an incomparable athlete, a two-time Olympic gold medalist for Team USA. She endured mistreatment and a show trial in Russia with characteristic grit and incredible dignity. She represents the best America, best about America. It is across the board, everything about her. She wrote to me back in July. She didn't ask for special treatment, even though we've been working on a release from the day one. She requested a simple quote, "Please don't forget about me and the other American detainees. Please do all you can to bring us home." We never forgot about Brittney. We've not forgotten about Paul Whalen, who's been unjustly detained in Russia for years.
Okay, so there you go, right? Pretty basic statement in regards to Brittney Griner, but he also mentioned this other guy, Paul Whalen, who has been, who was arrested back in 2018, and they've been trying to get him freed as well ever since. Now, conservatives have been looking at this situation and sort of saying, oh, well, why did you pick the WNBA star over this, Marine who was arrested? And that's just not what the situation was. Obviously, we will never know the full extent of the details and how these negotiations have been playing out, but, obviously, it's a different situation to get a WNBA star, back to the United States who was charged with having 2 vape pens versus, having a former Marine or a military personnel like that. And also, in terms of like whether or not they could have easily just made this happen, we're going to hear from Biden here in a second, as well as from Paul himself, basically characterize the situation as though this wasn't like picking one or the other. This was the only deal that was on the table, and it was only, get Brittney Griner back in exchange for this arms dealer or nothing. And so we basically just chose to go with getting Brittney back, which I think was the correct decision on this. But again, you also had Brittney Griner's wife, Sherelle, who came out and made a public statement about Paul as well. She says, here from The Independent, Brittney Griner's wife, Sherelle, vows to fight for Paul Whalen as she celebrates WNBA star's release. So again, nobody's forgetting about this guy. Nobody's trying to, play this off as if, there's no ongoing problems or that there's nothing else that needs to be done in this situation. But a little bit more details on him. They say President Joe Biden said during a White House press conference on Thursday that we just watched that Russia had refused to include in an exchange for Russian arms dealer Victor Bout. He says it was a choice of getting Brittney or nothing. And speaking to CNN, Mr. Whalen himself said that he was a victim of political extortion. And he continued, "They've always considered me to be at a higher level than any other criminals of my sort. And for whatever reason, I'm treated differently than any individual here from a Western country that's also on a charge of espionage." He called on the Biden administration to do whatever it took to get him home, regardless of the price that they might have to pay. He says, "My bags are packed. I'm ready to go home. I just need an airplane to come and get me." So, obviously you feel a significant degree of sympathy for this guy as well. In terms of like whether or not the charges against him were legitimate in any way, I have absolutely no fucking idea. But, obviously Russia is similar to how they weaponized Brittney Griner's detention, is weaponizing this one as well. But according to the Biden administration, this was not even on the table for them to even potentially get this guy back home. But we have another statement here from Paul's brother. They say in a statement emailed to several news outlets, the brother, David Whalen, expressed concern for Paul's well-being after Ms. Griner's release, saying, "I can't even fathom how Paul will feel when he learns. Paul has worked so hard to survive for nearly 4 years of this injustice. His hopes had soared with the knowledge that the U.S. government was taking concrete steps and one towards his release. He'd been worrying about where he would live when he got back to the United States." So again, obviously it's good news, bad news to some extent. Good that Brittney's being released. Obviously bad that this guy was not able to be released in this trade-off as well. But, he's not coming out here and saying that, oh, they shouldn't have released Brittney. He's coming out here and saying, we have to continue obviously fighting for Paul's release. And honestly, he's right. I couldn't even imagine putting myself in the mental position of Paul once he finds out that they managed to successfully negotiate the release of Brittney Griner after he's already been there for 4 years and they haven't managed to do it for him. But now I want to get into some of these deranged conservative responses to this entire situation. So here to start us off, we have Steven Crowder saying this deal was shameful for the United States. Hashtag Brittney Griner. Okay, shameful for the United States. And he's posted a bunch of other different tweets as well, along with a lot of other well-known conservative pundits about how, horrible this was for the United States and an embarrassment on the global stage, and how we just released the world's most notorious terrorist who's going to go on to kill, countless Americans in exchange for Brittney Griner. Obviously, they're using this as a moment to just attack the Biden administration, I think for pretty bullshit reasons. You want to talk about, arms dealers, right? As if conservatives have any principled objection to selling weapons of war war and death around the world. I mean, it's just a complete fucking joke, right? I mean, these are the same conservatives who year on year on year, in accordance with Democrats as well, raising the military budget. The Pentagon still can't pass an audit. We have nearly $1 trillion a year that's being dumped into our military. We sell weapons all across the world, in some cases to brutal dictatorships that are in the midst of ongoing genocides like Saudi Arabia. We sell weapons to Israel. We sell weapons to so many different nefarious actors around the world, and that doesn't even get into the weapons that the U.S. military themselves are buying and using to go commit war crimes overseas. And I mean, you could make an argument that the United States military-industrial complex in and of itself is solely responsible for potentially millions and millions of deaths over the last couple of decades. So the idea that like conservatives are coming out and saying, oh my god, you released this arms dealer and he's the most evil guy on the planet, it's like, well, what do you think we're doing? Okay, there's lots of arms dealers around the world. This guy, I read a little bit into his background, and yeah, he was pretty terrible, right? Pretty brutal, has absolutely no filter in terms of who he was willing to sell arms to, and some people probably did die as a result of his actions. But at the same time, it's like, really, are we going to have this conversation? If you want to actually have that conversation about selling weapons of war to nefarious actors, I mean, the U.S. government, or these U.S. weapons manufacturers like Raytheon and Halliburton and Boeing and all of the rest of them, they are far more destructive across the world in terms of the arms that they are shipping to all of these different actors. So I mean, again, kind of disingenuous arguments here coming from the conservative side of this equation. We had another one here from Betty Johnson. He says, meet Brittney Griner and Marine Paul Whalen. Both Americans, both were convicted in Russian courts on dubious charges, both serving multi-year sentences in Russian prison. Brittney hates America. Paul served America. Guess which one Biden traded a terrorist to free? Okay, so again, I mean, if you accept what the Joe Biden administration is saying, and I think that it's fair to do that, right? It's not as if he was just like offered both of them and he just chose to bring back Brittney Griner because she's a radical lefty, hates America, and Joe Biden likes that about her or something like that. No, I mean, from everything that we know about the situation, this was the only option that was on the table. Now, I mean, again, obviously, they're going to continue in this process to try to get Paul freed as well. What is that going to take? What are the parameters of a potential, prisoner swap for that going to be? I have absolutely no fucking idea, but, he's going to continue working on this, and this is something that, not only Biden, but, I mean, this guy's been in jail for 4 years now, since 2018. Why did Trump not get him freed successfully? Was he not focused on that? Does he hate these brave American, patriots that are stuck overseas? No, I mean, it's just like, these are complicated situations. You're dealing with Russia. Obviously they have their own motivations to keep this guy locked up, to keep this point of leverage. So it's going to be a fucking difficult battle that is probably going to take a significant amount of time. Now, again, you could show sympathy for his family. Obviously, you could show sympathy for him, but using him to like weaponize this against releasing Brittney Griner is just completely grotesque and like unnecessary. But I'll finish off here with this tweet here from Nick Adams, who insists on calling himself an alpha male, this conservative troll over here. He says, President Trump destroys Joe Biden over Brittney Griner prisoner swap. So what did Donald Trump have to say about this? He says, what kind of a deal is it to swap Brittney Griner, a basketball player who openly hates our country, for a man known as the Merchant of Death, who is one of the biggest arms dealers anywhere in the world and responsible for tens of thousands of deaths and horrific injuries? Why wasn't former Marine Paul Whalen included in this totally one-sided transaction? He would have been let out for the asking. What a stupid and unpatriotic embarrassment for the United States. So again, I mean, you're just wrong about that, because like we just saw the details behind this entire situation. If Joe Biden had the chance to release both of them, he would have done that. And I'm sure if he had the chance, to negotiate this arms dealer trade-off for Paul Whalen as well, or him as an individual, they would have done that as well. So I mean, like, portraying this as if it's a Joe Biden being anti-patriotic or like hating the military or Marines or something like that, and being biased in favor of Brittney Griner. I mean, it's just a completely ridiculous narrative at face value. But I mean, there you have it. Brittney Griner finally going to be coming home. She's again been in jail for months now. I mean, I think it was something like 270 days that she ended up being in jail after she was arrested for completely bullshit charges, having a couple weed vape cartridges on her or whatever the fuck. So I mean, it's definitely a positive development. Of course, conservatives are weaponizing this to the maximum extent possible, as they do with every single situation that they can. But in the aggregate, this is definitely a good thing. Although the Russian arms dealer guy, clearly a terrible actor in this equation, having Brittney Griner come home, even with the lacking in terms of getting Paul Whalen home as well, it's definitely going to be a positive thing. And it took long enough, honestly.
Everyone is saying good Politic guy has the best Politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying